Today's topic is sharpening and maintaining your kitchen knives. Now, subscriber Designer Hacks asked me to do this 2 months ago, and the reason for the delay is I was still involved, probably like many of you are, in trying different sharpeners, different devices. I bought an electric grinder kind of thing. I bought all kinds of things, and I was never really happy with them until finally I settled on basically the oldest original method of maintaining and sharpening my kitchen knives. So that's what I want to show you today. For most home cooks, the only tool you'll ever need for sharpening your kitchen knives is a sharpening steel like this one. After using your knife 3 or 4 times, a few strokes on each side of the steel will be enough to give your knife a passably sharp blade. The first thing you have to think about when you're using a steel to sharpen or to dress a knife is the angle of the blade relative to the steel. Now, using a standard 8-inch chef's knife, the angle will come out right to about 15 degrees when you leave about 1/4 of an inch between the steel and the spine of the knife. You don't have to worry too much about that. As long as you work a shallow angle and what's comfortable to you, you're the same person. You're going to be doing it over and over again, and you will just develop a consistency that'll work for you, I'm sure. The next thing you have to consider is the motion of sharpening. You start at the heel of the knife, go down and rock towards you till you get to the tip, maintaining that 1/4 of an inch space at the top. There are times when a knife edge is so dull or damaged that it needs more than a sharpening steel to restore it. That's where your sharpening stones come in handy. They're known as whetstones. Now that's not whetstones as dipped in water, although some of them are dipped in water. It's whet, W-H-E-T. I'm a language buff, so I get into these trivial things. Okay, so let's start. I suggest you do what I've done. I take my least glamorous kitchen knife and I'm going to dull the heck out of it on a brick so that we can test my sharpening skills and show you what you can do when your blade is so dull that it can't be used anymore. It almost hurts me to do this to a kitchen carving knife. Take it to an extreme. Yeah, that's pretty dull. There are basically 3 types of whetstones. There are the soaking stones, the splashing stones, and the oil stones. Oil stones are wet with mineral oil, food grade mineral oil, before the sharpening starts. Soaking stones, as the name implies, are soaked in water before they can be used. And splash stones are stones where you splash a little water on them, on top of them, as you're using them, and that keeps them lubricated and keeps the grit free. The next thing to know about is the grit number. They'll range anywhere from 300 to 8,000 or so, 8 or 10,000, with the highest numbers being the finest grits. The low number, like actually the one I use, the 400, is really only used when your knife is very, very dull or damaged, nicked, chipped, and so on. The 8,000 is also rarely used. It's used really to polish the edge on a high-end knife, like some of the fancy Japanese knives. You might want to polish the edge to an extra degree with the 8,000 grit. Otherwise, a 1,000 is pretty typically what you would use to dress your blade, keep it sharp, and then you might polish it with a little higher. If you had a 6 or 8,000, you might want to polish it, but it's not extremely important at that point. Okay, let's get started and take a look at some of these stones. Most stones will be made with double grits. This particular one is a 400 on the coarse side and a 1000 on the finer side. We're going to start today with the 400 because this blade has been badly abused by me on the brick. To start the process, you have to consider the grip you use. Wrap your middle finger around the handle, thumb on the spine of the knife, and your index finger near the cutting edge, okay? On or near it. Now the rest just takes practice, patience, and consistency. It's good to have a spray bottle of water handy to keep the surface of your stone wet. Now what we're going to do is lay the knife across the stone at about a 45-degree angle or so. And remember the way we used it on the steel, we kept a little bit of space, about 1/4 of an inch from the spine to the stone, and that's going to be our guide angle. If you just are unable to ever do that, there are gauges one can buy that will help you set an exact angle. But actually, if you practice and you're consistent, you're going to be able to do just fine. Now, the action is going to be back and forth on the stone with the free hand putting a little pressure near the edge of the blade. More pressure when you're pulling back and less when you're pushing away. In other words, by pushing away, I mean when the cutting edge of the knife is as though it were slicing off pieces of the stone. That's pushing away, and you don't use so much pressure at that point. Very gently. The pressure comes when you're coming back on the stone. Away gently, back a little stronger. Okay, now, here's what we want to do. We want to go back and forth several times at each point of the knife. I shouldn't say point, at each position of the knife. Don't forget to get this lower edge of your knife edge so it's sharp all the way to the end. Once you've done that 3 or 4 times, you can slip the knife a little bit, perhaps a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and continue the same process. Slipping it again, keeping your fingers near the edge of the blade to put pressure on. A few strokes, slip the knife again. When you're done on one side, of course, you'll have to turn the knife over and do the other side of the blade. Your grip will roll right around. This time your thumb will be at the heel of the blade and your index finger on top. Your middle finger is still wrapped around the handle. Now we're doing the same thing. A little bit of pressure when we're going away, less pressure when we're coming towards us. Back and forth. Slip the knife in a little bit, each 2 or 3 passes. Keep your free hand near the edge of the blade to keep the pressure on. More away from you, less towards you. As you get close to the tip of the blade, to maintain the right edge, you'll have to lift the handle slightly. Note I'm lifting the handle slightly as I get towards the tip of the blade. Once you can feel that the knife is becoming sharp, hard to judge, it really is a judgment call and some experience, but you'll feel that the knife is sharpening. It's time to turn the stone and select a finer grit. We're done really with the sharpening part, and we're going to go to the polishing, honing part. So we turn the stone over. In this case, I'm using 1000 grit. Make sure it's wet, and we will start the process. But this time, we'll only be drawing the knife toward us. In other words, not the implied direction of slicing pieces of the stone off, the other way. So we'll go and we'll be dressing the knife in this fashion. Don't forget to include the heel of the blade so it's sharp all the way down. To maintain the same sharpening angle as you get towards the tip of the blade, you'll have to lift the handle slightly. Now, if you wanted to, you could go further with finer grits up to 8,000 or so, or a leather strop or anything of that nature. But at this point, this knife is sharp enough for use in just about any kitchen. Well, I hope you're going to get something out of this, and you're going to avoid buying hundreds of dollars worth of sharpening devices. Instead, you're going to stick to some of the old classics. The sharpening steel that you probably already have. You probably got it with a knife set. If you didn't, they're not awfully expensive. And sharpening stones can be expensive if you bought an extensive set of every single grit and possibility, but you really don't need them. As you'll see in my demonstration, you can get by with simpler grits, a couple of different grits, and they'll work just fine. Okay, what I'd like you to do now, if you haven't yet hit subscribe, I'd like you to examine your conscience and try to figure out why not? Why haven't you hit subscribe for me? Perhaps more important, have you referred anybody else? Have you shared any of my videos? Do you know someone with dull kitchen knives who cares, who'd like to have them better, who's out buying different devices and different machines to sharpen their knives and hasn't been having much success? Well, I think you owe it to yourself and to them to share this video with them. If you liked it, hit like. If you didn't, don't. It's okay. I'm not mad. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.